He thought money could fix anything. He was wrong the moment he saw the fear in his daughter's eyes. Ethan Caldwell had closed billion-dollar deals in glass towers overlooking Manhattan, had shaken hands with senators, and CEOs, had signed contracts thicker than a phone book, without his pulse ever changing. But nothing in his 42 years prepared him for the way 9-year-old Lily Caldwell stood in the doorway of his Connecticut estate, like a guest instead of his child. The November air carried a sharp chill 42 degrees and dropping, and Lily's small frame looked even smaller inside her oversized gray cardigan as she stepped across the marble floor, her mobility brace visible beneath neatly pressed jeans. She didn't run to him. She didn't smile. She simply nodded, polite, careful, like she had practiced not taking up space. Ethan felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest as he knelt to her level, noticing how she flinched at sudden movement, how her blue eyes, so much like his, kept drifting toward the driveway, as if waiting for permission to breathe. He told himself it was adjustment, that after years living primarily with her mother in a quiet suburb outside Boston, she just needed time to settle into the rhythm of his world of security gates, black SUVs, and echoing hallways. Yet when he lifted her overnight bag, it felt far too light for a child moving homes. And when he gently asked if she was hungry, Lily answered with a rehearsed, "I'm okay," the kind of answer no 9-year-old should give. As the front doors closed behind them with a muted thud, worth more than most people's annual salary, Ethan realized this wasn't just a homecoming. It was the beginning of a truth he hadn't been paying attention to, and the silence between them was louder than any boardroom he had ever conquered. That night, the house felt too large for a child who moved as quietly as Lily did. Ethan had instructed the staff to keep their distance, wanting her first evening there to feel personal, safe, simple. He personally carried a tray upstairs with grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and a glass of warm milk, the kind of dinner a pediatric specialist once recommended for steady nutrition and comfort. Lily thanked him in a voice barely above a whisper and ate slowly, carefully, as if measuring each bite. Ethan noticed how she glanced at him before lifting her fork as though expecting correction. The observation settled heavily in his chest. After dinner, he walked her down the long hallway to the bedroom he had prepared weeks earlier. Walls painted a soft coastal blue, shelves lined with new books, a window overlooking 3 acres of quiet autumn trees. It should have felt magical. Instead, Lily paused at the threshold and asked almost formally whether she was allowed to close the door at night. The question stunned him. He forced a gentle smile and told her she could close it, lock it, decorate it, make it her own. She nodded, but her shoulders remained tense. Later, as Ethan reviewed emails in his study, he heard a faint sound through the baby monitor he had insisted on installing for medical safety. It was not crying. It was a soft apology repeated into the dark, as if she believed she had done something wrong simply by existing. Ethan leaned back in his leather chair, staring at the ceiling, realizing that whatever had shaped that reflex did not happen overnight. Something in his daughter's world had taught her to shrink herself, and he had been too busy building empires to see it. The next afternoon, Ethan decided to personally watch Lily board the school bus at the end of the long private driveway, telling himself it was simply responsible parenting, nothing more. The sky hung low and gray over the Connecticut hills, the temperature hovering just above 50 degrees, and fallen leaves scraped softly across the pavement as the yellow bus pulled up with a tired hiss of air brakes. Lily stood beside him in her navy coat, her mobility brace secured neatly beneath tailored slacks, backpack straps pulled tight against her shoulders as if she needed the pressure to stay steady. Ethan crouched down and reminded her that he would be home early, that dinner would be whatever she chose, that she could call him anytime. She nodded with that same careful politeness, then turned toward the bus. What happened next lasted only seconds, but it rearranged something permanent inside him. The driver, a broad man with a sunburned neck and mirrored sunglasses, gestured impatiently when Lily moved more slowly than the other children. His hand closed around her upper arm, not violently but firmly enough to communicate annoyance, and he lifted her the last step instead of allowing her to steady herself. Lily did not protest. She did not complain. She simply lowered her eyes and whispered another apology. The bus doors folded shut, and Ethan remained standing on the asphalt long after it disappeared down the tree-lined road. It was not the gesture itself that unsettled him. It was her reaction. The reflex to apologize for needing help. The reflex to shrink. As the wind picked up around his tailored coat, Ethan understood that what he had witnessed was not a single moment of impatience. It was a pattern, and patterns did not begin at the bus stop. By the time the bus returned at 3:45 in the afternoon, Ethan was already waiting at the end of the driveway, hands in the pockets of his wool coat, jaw set in a way that had unsettled competitors in boardrooms for decades. The sky had cleared into a pale blue sunlight, cutting across the bare trees and glinting off the tinted windows of the approaching bus. When the doors folded open, children spilled out in a rush of laughter and backpacks, but Lily emerged last, moving carefully down the steps. The driver exhaled loudly enough for Ethan to hear from several feet away. This time Ethan stepped forward before the man could reach for her. He offered his hand, steady and calm, allowing Lily to descend at her own pace. The driver forced a thin smile and said that traffic had been heavy and schedules were tight. Ethan returned the smile with one equally measured, introducing himself, not as a concerned parent, but as Lily Caldwell's father. The name alone shifted the air. The driver straightened, suddenly polite, explaining that he was only trying to help children move quickly for safety reasons. Ethan nodded, voice even, but his eyes never left the man's face. He asked about training protocols for assisting students with mobility needs and whether the district required sensitivity certification. The questions were simple, direct, delivered without raised volume. Yet the driver's confidence thinned. Lily stood beside Ethan, silent, staring at the gravel as if hoping to disappear. When the bus finally pulled away, Ethan knelt beside her and asked whether the ride home was comfortable. She hesitated, then said it was fine. The word sounded practiced. As they walked back toward the house, sunlight warming the long stretch of driveway, Ethan felt the first real spark of suspicion ignite. He had built companies by recognizing patterns hidden beneath polished explanations, and what he had just seen felt exactly like that kind of pattern. That evening, Ethan did what he had trained himself to do whenever instinct signaled that something beneath the surface was wrong. He gathered information quietly. After Lily fell asleep just after 8:30, her bedroom door slightly ajar and a nightlight casting a soft amber glow across the hallway. He walked into his private study and powered on the wall of monitors connected to the estate security system. He rewound the afternoon footage from the driveway, watching frame by frame as the bus arrived, as Lily descended, as the driver's posture shifted when he noticed Ethan standing there. Nothing in the recording crossed the line into obvious misconduct, yet the tension in Lily's shoulders was unmistakable. Ethan paused the screen on her face, zooming in slightly. There it was again. The guarded expression of a child bracing for something unpleasant. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin, recalling quarterly reports and acquisition negotiations where small inconsistencies revealed massive corruption. Patterns began with subtle details. He opened his laptop and requested access to the school district's transportation policies, scanning for language about assisting students with mobility devices. The guidelines were clear, professional, structured around patience and respect. What he witnessed did not align with that tone. Then he reviewed financial statements from the tuition account he had been transferring funds into for years, trusting that Lily's mother had managed educational expenses responsibly. The balances looked lower than expected. Withdrawals appeared irregular. His jaw tightened as he scrolled further back, noticing months where tuition payments to the school were recorded as pending, rather than completed. A quiet realization settled over him. If there were discrepancies in something as basic as school payments, then the pattern might stretch far beyond a single bus ride. Upstairs, Lily shifted in her sleep. Downstairs, Ethan made a decision that would alter every relationship tied to his daughter's past. He would not confront anyone impulsively. He would verify everything. The following morning began with a brittle layer of frost across the estate lawn, the temperature reading 36 degrees as pale sunlight stretched over the quiet Connecticut hills. Ethan woke before 6, long before the staff arrived, and prepared breakfast himself. Scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, fresh strawberries sliced carefully into small pieces. When Lily entered the kitchen, moving cautiously with her brace secured and her backpack already on her shoulders, he noticed the faint circles beneath her eyes. He asked if she had slept well. She answered that she did not want to cause trouble. The response did not match the question. Ethan kept his tone warm and told her that in this house, honesty was never trouble. She gave a small nod, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. At 7:20, the bus appeared again at the end of the driveway. This time, Ethan remained several yards back, watching without announcing his presence. The driver stepped down, glancing around before opening the door. Lily moved toward the steps slowly. Ethan saw the driver check his watch with visible impatience, heard the faint exhale of frustration carried by the cold air. When Lily hesitated to adjust her footing, the driver spoke sharply, not loudly enough to qualify as shouting, but firmly enough to pressure her into moving faster than her body comfortably allowed. Ethan's hands curled into fists inside his coat pockets. He forced himself to stay still. Confrontation without proof would change nothing. The bus pulled away, taillights fading down the winding road, and Ethan immediately called his chief of security. Within minutes, he requested discreet surveillance focused solely on ensuring Lily's safety during transport. He also instructed his financial advisor to conduct a comprehensive audit of every transfer sent to her mother over the past 5 years. He spoke calmly, methodically, as though discussing a merger. Yet beneath that calm, something fierce had awakened. For years, he had trusted distance and money to provide protection. Now he understood that protection required presence, and presence required truth, no matter how uncomfortable that truth might become. By Wednesday afternoon, the first surveillance report arrived in Ethan's encrypted inbox, stamped with a precise time of 2:15 p.m. He closed the glass door to his study, dimmed the lights, and watched the silent footage recorded from a discreet vehicle positioned near the school loading zone. The camera angle captured the bus door and the line of children boarding. Lily appeared near the end, her brace visible beneath her jeans as she gripped the railing carefully. The driver did not strike her or shove her, but the pattern was unmistakable. He rushed her. He leaned too close. He tapped his watch in exaggerated gestures meant to pressure, not assist. Each time Lily responded the same way, shoulders drawn inward, head lowered, apology mouthed without sound. Ethan replayed the clip 3 times, studying the details the way he would study stock fluctuations before a major acquisition. It was not a single incident. It was repeated conditioning. He switched to a second file compiled by his financial advisor. The numbers were worse. Over the past 3 years, more than $200,000 labeled as tuition support had been transferred to Monica Hayes. Yet official school statements showed partial payments, delayed installments, and at one point, a warning of potential enrollment suspension due to outstanding balances. Ethan felt the air thin in his lungs. He had wired those funds personally, believing he was ensuring stability. Instead, the paper trail suggested diversion. He scrolled further. Grocery expenditures minimal, cash withdrawals frequent, medical reimbursements claimed but not reflected in provider invoices. A quiet fury began to build, not explosive but controlled, the kind that restructures entire industries. That evening, when Lily returned home, she seemed more fatigued than usual, moving slowly toward the house as the sun dipped below the trees at 4:47 p.m. Ethan knelt and asked whether anyone ever made her feel rushed. She hesitated longer this time. Then she whispered that sometimes it was better to hurry so people would not get upset. The statement landed heavier than any financial discrepancy. It confirmed what the footage suggested. Someone had taught his daughter that her physical limitation was an inconvenience to others. As darkness settled over the estate, Ethan understood the investigation was no longer about suspicion. It was about uncovering how deep the damage went. Thursday morning arrived with steady rain tapping against the tall windows of the Caldwell estate, the sky a heavy gray that seemed to press down on the quiet grounds. Ethan stood at the kitchen island, reviewing a printed report his financial advisor had delivered by hand at 7:30 a.m. The summary confirmed what the digital statements had hinted at. Large tuition transfers had been redirected within days of arrival into secondary accounts linked solely to Monica Hayes. School billing offices showed repeated reminders sent to her address about incomplete payments. Some had gone unanswered. Others had been acknowledged with promises that funds were on the way. Ethan's jaw tightened as he imagined Lily sitting in classrooms unaware that her enrollment had once been at risk, while he believed everything was secure. At 8:15, he placed a direct call to the private academy's administrative office, introducing himself formally and requesting a full accounting history. The registrar, surprised but cooperative, disclosed that Lily had been temporarily withheld from extracurricular programs the previous semester due to unresolved balances. Ethan felt a cold wave move through him. Lily had never mentioned missing activities. He thanked the registrar calmly, voice steady, then ended the call and stared out at the rain soaking 3 acres of manicured lawn. Upstairs, Lily was preparing for school, moving carefully as she fastened her brace. When she came down, he noticed how she hesitated before asking whether she would still be allowed to attend class if someone forgot to pay again. The question confirmed everything. He assured her that no one would ever question her place in any classroom again. After the bus departed that morning, Ethan convened his legal team in the glass conference room overlooking the estate pool. He presented the financial discrepancies and the surveillance clips without emotion. His attorneys exchanged measured glances, recognizing both liability and opportunity. Ethan did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply instructed them to build a comprehensive case file, discreet and airtight. The rain continued through the afternoon, washing over the property like a warning. By nightfall, Ethan understood that the issue extended beyond transportation conduct. It pointed toward systematic neglect, tied directly to the person who had once promised to protect their daughter. By Friday evening, the investigation had expanded beyond what Ethan initially imagined, and the evidence now formed a pattern too deliberate to dismiss as oversight. His legal team compiled certified copies of bank transfers, tuition invoices, and internal school correspondence, laying them across the long oak table in his study as though mapping out a battlefield. The numbers were precise. Over 3 years, tuition funds had been withdrawn within 48 hours of deposit and redirected into accounts associated solely with Monica Hayes. Several withdrawals coincided with luxury retail purchases and travel bookings unrelated to Lily's education. Ethan absorbed the information in silence, the firelight reflecting against the glass frames on the wall behind him. Yet the most disturbing document arrived just before 9 p.m. It was a medical summary from a pediatric clinic near Monica's former residence outside Boston. The record indicated that Lily had been evaluated for nutritional deficiency 18 months earlier. The physician had noted concerns about irregular meals and recommended consistent dietary monitoring. Follow-up appointments were never completed. Ethan felt the room narrow around him. He replayed every memory of sending funds, of trusting updates, of believing distance equaled stability. Upstairs, Lily sat at the kitchen counter, finishing homework under soft pendant lighting. When Ethan joined her, he noticed how carefully she erased even minor pencil marks, as though imperfection carried consequences. He gently asked whether she ever felt hungry at her mother's house. Lily hesitated, then answered that sometimes dinner was late because money was tight, and she did not want to complain. The statement landed with quiet devastation. Money had never been tight, not with the transfers he had authorized. A cold clarity settled over him. This was not mismanagement. It was intentional diversion that left a child adjusting her expectations downward to survive circumstances she should never have faced. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the driveway slick beneath the security lights. Ethan stepped onto the patio alone, the night air hovering at 40 degrees, and looked across the dark property he had built as a symbol of success. For the first time, it felt like a fortress that had failed its most important resident. Inside the house, Lily laughed softly at something on her tablet, a fragile sound that seemed almost unfamiliar. Ethan closed his eyes and made a decision that solidified like steel. The truth would not remain contained within documents. It would surface publicly, undeniably, and permanently. The only question left was how far he was willing to go to ensure that it did. Saturday morning arrived, unnaturally quiet sunlight breaking through lingering clouds and stretching across the wide glass panels of the Caldwell estate. Ethan had not slept more than 3 hours, yet his mind felt sharper than it had in years. At 8:10 a.m., his lead attorney confirmed that the financial evidence was sufficient to initiate both civil and criminal review if presented properly. The words echoed in his head long after the call ended. Initiate review, formal action, public record. Each phrase carried consequences that extended beyond courtroom walls. Upstairs, Lily sat cross-legged on the living room rug, assembling a small wooden puzzle, her movements careful but focused. Ethan watched her from the kitchen doorway, studying the way she concentrated, as though mistakes required apology. He realized that exposing Monica would not simply correct financial wrongdoing. It would rewrite Lily's understanding of loyalty, family, and trust. That truth unsettled him more than the legal battle ahead. He stepped into the room and asked gently about her time living outside Boston. Lily paused, eyes fixed on the puzzle pieces, and said that sometimes the house felt cold because the heat was turned down to save money. She added that she tried to eat less, so groceries would last longer. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs. He knew exactly how much he had transferred every quarter. There had never been a shortage. He asked whether anyone had ever told her to keep quiet about bills or school letters. Lily nodded faintly and whispered that grown-up problems were not for children to talk about. The statement cut deeper than any accusation. Ethan moved to sit beside her, promising that she would never again need to protect adults from their own choices. As afternoon light shifted across the hardwood floors, his internal conflict intensified. If he pursued public exposure, headlines would follow. Interviews. Speculation. Lily's privacy could fracture under scrutiny. Yet if he handled everything quietly, Monica might negotiate reduced consequences and continue manipulating narratives. Ethan understood reputation management better than anyone. He had preserved billion-dollar valuations through carefully timed disclosures. But this was different. This was not about stock price. It was about the silent conditioning of a child who believed hunger and hurry were normal. As evening approached, he walked through the estate grounds, the temperature hovering near 50 degrees, wrestling with the scale of response. Justice demanded visibility. Protection demanded strategy. And for the first time, Ethan Caldwell questioned whether power alone could guarantee both. By Sunday afternoon, the estate felt deceptively peaceful, golden light spilling across the manicured lawn, while Lily practiced walking short distances without assistance under the guidance of a private physical therapist Ethan had arranged that morning. The therapist moved patiently beside her, encouraging steady breaths and balanced steps measured in inches rather than feet. Ethan observed from the terrace, hands resting on the cool stone railing, absorbing every small victory, as though it were a quarterly report trending upward. Yet beneath the calm surface, preparation intensified. His attorneys finalized documentation tracing tuition transfers into Monica Hayes' personal accounts, while his security team compiled dated footage from the school transportation route. The pattern was no longer circumstantial. It was chronological, consistent, and verifiable. Late in the afternoon, Ethan received a call from a former neighbor of Monica's in the Boston suburb where Lily had lived. The woman spoke cautiously, explaining that utility services at the house had been temporarily interrupted twice over the past year due to delayed payments. Ethan thanked her, each word measured, and ended the call with a growing sense of inevitability. When Lily joined him on the terrace, cheeks slightly flushed from exertion, she asked whether grown-ups ever got in trouble for lying about money. The question froze him in place. He knelt to her level and said that actions always have consequences, even if they take time to surface. She seemed to consider this, then asked whether telling the truth could make people angry. Ethan did not hesitate. He told her that sometimes truth creates discomfort before it creates freedom. As dusk settled and the temperature dropped to 48 degrees, he stood alone in his study reviewing a draft strategy proposed by his legal counsel. Quiet settlement and restitution were possible options. Confidential resolution, limited exposure, clean headlines. But Ethan understood something deeper now. The damage done to Lily was not merely financial. It was psychological conditioning shaped by secrecy and intimidation. If he resolved everything behind closed doors, the narrative could be rewritten again. Monica could portray herself as misunderstood. The bus driver could claim misinterpretation. The cycle could repeat elsewhere. Ethan closed the folder and stared at his reflection in the darkened window. For years he had built influence to control outcomes. Now that influence demanded decisive clarity. The next move would determine not only legal consequences, but the example his daughter would carry into adulthood. Silence protected reputations. Exposure protected truth. And Ethan was running out of patience for silence. Monday morning arrived with a sharp clarity that mirrored Ethan's resolve, the sky bright and cloudless, as if indifferent to the storm building beneath his composure. At 7 a.m., he convened his legal and security teams in the main conference room overlooking the estate grounds, sunlight reflecting across polished glass as documents were arranged with meticulous precision. The evidence now formed a comprehensive timeline. Tuition transfers initiated from Ethan's accounts, immediate redirection into Monica Hayes's personal banking channels. Documented payment deficiencies from Lily's academy medical notes indicating nutritional concern and surveillance, confirming repeated impatience directed toward a child already conditioned to apologize for existing. Each piece reinforced the next. There were no gaps, only intention. One attorney proposed filing quietly with the district attorney's office and allowing formal investigation to proceed without publicity. Another suggested notifying the school board and terminating the transportation contract discreetly. Ethan listened without interruption, absorbing each strategic angle. Yet his mind returned to Lily's question from the terrace whether truth made people angry. He realized the greater lesson was not about anger, but accountability. If he chose silence, the public narrative could be manipulated. Financial restitution might occur, but the pattern of behavior would remain hidden. And hidden patterns repeat. By late morning, he requested a full background check on Monica's recent financial activities and learned she had been accepted as a guest speaker at an upcoming charity gala focused on community education reform, an event scheduled for the following weekend at a luxury hotel in Manhattan. The irony was staggering. A fundraiser celebrating educational integrity, while tuition money meant for a child had been diverted elsewhere. Ethan felt a controlled fire settle into his core. That gala would gather business leaders, nonprofit executives, local press, and donors. It was the exact environment where truth could not be easily suppressed. As afternoon light shifted across the estate's marble floors, Ethan walked into Lily's room where she was reading quietly by the window. He told her that sometimes adults must stand in bright rooms and speak difficult truths so children can feel safe in dark ones. She studied him carefully, then asked whether he was afraid. He answered honestly that he was, but he was more afraid of doing nothing. Outside, the security gates closed with a low mechanical hum as preparations quietly advanced. The decision had been made. The exposure would not be private. It would be undeniable. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, gold light, cascading over white linen tables and polished marble floors, as Manhattan traffic hummed faintly beyond the tall glass windows. The charity gala for educational reform was in full swing, donors dressed in tailored tuxedos and designer gowns, exchanging confident laughter over glasses of sparkling water and carefully plated hors d'oeuvres. At precisely 7:40 p.m., Ethan Caldwell stepped through the grand entrance, composed, immaculately dressed in a midnight blue suit, his presence drawing subtle waves of recognition across the room. Cameras flashed softly, hands extended. He greeted each guest with measured warmth, every movement controlled, every word intentional. Across the ballroom, Monica Hayes stood near the stage backdrop, radiant in a silver evening gown, speaking animatedly with a group of nonprofit executives about equity and opportunity for underprivileged students. The irony pressed against Ethan's ribs like a physical weight. He moved through the crowd without confrontation, allowing anticipation to build. At 8:15, the Master of Ceremonies introduced Monica as a passionate advocate for educational access. Applause filled the room as she ascended the stage, smile-polished voice smooth and persuasive. She spoke about responsibility, about transparency, about ensuring that every child receives proper support. Ethan felt the room tighten around him with each word. When she concluded, the applause swelled again. That was when he rose from his seat. Calm, unhurried. He approached the stage as murmurs spread, the event coordinator hesitating before handing him the microphone. Ethan began without accusation, thanking the organization for its commitment to children. His voice carried evenly across the ballroom, steady and resonant. Then the screen behind Monica illuminated. Financial statements appeared, first projected in crisp detail. Dates, transfer amounts, corresponding withdrawals. The room fell silent. Next came official school notices documenting delayed tuition payments. Gasps rippled through the audience. Finally, medical documentation, noting nutritional concerns and missed follow-ups. Ethan never raised his voice. He simply aligned facts in chronological order, explaining that the funds had been intended for one specific child. Lily, a 9-year-old girl who believed hunger was her responsibility. Monica's composure fractured visibly as the documents continued to scroll. Whispers intensified. Phones were lifted discreetly. The narrative she had carefully curated began to dissolve under verified evidence. Ethan ended with a single statement, delivered without tremor, that education reform begins at home with honesty. In the back of the ballroom, plainclothes investigators who had been briefed in advance stepped forward as the projector light cast stark shadows across the stage. The moment had arrived, and there would be no rewriting it. For several suspended seconds after the final document faded from the massive projection screen, the ballroom remained utterly silent, as though even the clinking of glassware understood that something irreversible had just occurred. Monica Hayes stood frozen beneath the chandelier light. Her earlier confidence drained from her posture, as dozens of eyes shifted from Ethan to her and back again. The event organizers attempted to step forward, murmuring about misunderstandings and private discussions, but the presence of plainclothes investigators near the stage altered the atmosphere from confusion to inevitability. Ethan did not move closer to Monica. He did not accuse her with dramatic gestures. Instead, he remained at a respectful distance, allowing verified documentation to speak louder than any emotional confrontation ever could. One investigator calmly addressed her, requesting a private conversation regarding financial discrepancies tied to charitable misrepresentation and reported misuse of designated educational funds. The words were professional, procedural, precise, yet they landed with unmistakable gravity. Around the room, influential donors exchanged stunned expressions, some discreetly lowering their phones, while others continued recording. The charity's board members whispered urgently among themselves, already calculating reputational fallout. Monica attempted to regain composure, insisting there had been accounting errors, that transfers had been temporary, that explanations existed. But the projected timeline remained visible behind her numbers, aligned with dates cross-referenced with institutional records. Ethan's voice cut gently through the rising murmur as he clarified that every transfer had originated from his verified accounts, with documented intent for his daughter's tuition and medical stability. He did not mention anger. He mentioned responsibility. He did not describe suffering in dramatic detail. He described patterns. And patterns once illuminated cannot hide. As investigators formally requested her cooperation, the ballroom's energy shifted from glamour to accountability. Monica's carefully curated public persona fractured under scrutiny she had never anticipated in such a visible setting. The master of ceremonies quietly stepped aside. Donors who moments earlier applauded her advocacy now avoided direct eye contact. In the back of the room, a side door opened briefly as security coordinated logistics, ensuring the situation remained orderly and controlled. Ethan felt no triumph, only a solemn weight. Justice was not spectacle to him. It was correction. As Monica was escorted toward a private exit for formal processing, the projector screen dimmed, leaving the ballroom bathed once again in golden light that now felt harsher than before. Conversations resumed in low, unsettled tones. And in that charged space between reputation and reality, the truth stood exposed for everyone to see. When the ballroom doors finally closed behind the investigators and the murmurs dissolved into fragmented conversations, Ethan stepped away from the stage and into a quiet corridor lined with tall mirrors reflecting the fading glamour of the evening. His pulse was steady, yet the emotional weight pressed deeper now that the public exposure was complete. He had not acted out of vengeance. He had acted out of protection. Still, the cost of such visibility lingered in the air like perfume after a crowded event. His phone vibrated with incoming messages from board members, legal advisors, and media contacts requesting statements. He ignored them all. At 9:20 p.m., he called the estate. Lily answered on the third ring, her voice soft but curious. He asked what she was doing. She said she was reading by the window and watching the moon rise over the trees. Ethan closed his eyes, picturing the Connecticut sky hovering at 45 degrees calm and untouched by Manhattan's glare. He told her that sometimes when grown-ups make mistakes, other grown-ups have to step forward and correct them. There was a long pause on the line before she asked whether anyone was in trouble. He chose his words carefully, explaining that when money meant for school is not used for school, authorities review the situation to ensure fairness. Lily did not respond immediately. Then she asked the question that broke something open inside him. She asked whether it was her fault for costing too much. Ethan felt the breath leave his body. He leaned against the cool marble wall and told her with absolute certainty that she was never a cost. She was a responsibility, a privilege, a daughter. His voice trembled only once before steadying again. He promised her that she would never need to apologize for existing, for learning, for requiring support. On the other end of the line, he heard her inhale slowly, as though absorbing a truth she had never fully believed. Back in the ballroom, event staff quietly dismantled decorations, the glittering illusion of perfection already fading. Outside Manhattan, traffic moved relentlessly, unaware of the private revolution that had just unfolded inside a room built for celebration. Ethan stepped into the cool night air and looked up at the skyline, understanding that justice was not loud. It was deliberate. It was patient. And tonight, for the first time since Lily had walked through his front door like a guest in her own life, he felt that the imbalance had begun to shift in her favor. The following week unfolded with a steadiness that contrasted sharply against the storm of the gala. Formal charges were filed against Monica Hayes after investigators verified the financial redirection and documented misrepresentation of designated educational funds. Court proceedings were scheduled, and preliminary reports confirmed that restitution would be pursued alongside potential penalties. The legal language was clinical detached, but to Ethan, it represented accountability taking tangible shape. Simultaneously, the school district initiated an internal review of its transportation staff after receiving surveillance documentation from his legal team. By Thursday afternoon, the driver assigned to Lily's route was placed on administrative leave pending evaluation and retraining protocols. No public spectacle followed this development. It was handled through official channels, quiet but firm. At the Caldwell estate, mornings began to change. Instead of tension at the end of the driveway, a new transportation arrangement was implemented with a specialized service trained in mobility support. The driver introduced herself by name, knelt to Lily's eye level, and asked how she preferred to be assisted. That single question shifted the entire atmosphere. Lily hesitated at first, then answered with surprising clarity. She said she preferred to hold the railing herself. The driver nodded and waited patiently. Ethan watched from several yards away, feeling something inside him loosen. The pace of Lily's steps no longer felt like a liability. They felt respected. At home, a pediatric nutritionist conducted a full assessment and established a structured meal plan designed not for recovery from crisis, but for steady growth and strength. Lily's energy began to improve noticeably within days. Her laughter, once rare and cautious, surfaced more often during evening board games in the living room. Ethan made a deliberate effort to be present for each therapy session. Each homework review, each small milestone measured not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in inches of confidence regained. Late one afternoon, as autumn sunlight filtered through the trees, at 52 degrees, Lily completed an entire lap around the indoor therapy pool with minimal assistance. She looked up at her father afterward, cheeks flushed, and did not apologize for taking time. She simply smiled. That smile carried more significance than any courtroom outcome. Ethan understood that justice was only one component of transformation. The deeper victory was restoring a child's belief that her needs were valid. And as the estate grounds settled into quiet evenings once more, the fortress that had once felt hollow now began to feel like a home truly inhabited. The legal proceedings advanced steadily over the next several weeks, moving through formal hearings and financial audits with the deliberate rhythm of institutional accountability. Monica Hayes faced structured questioning regarding diverted tuition funds, documented misrepresentation, and failure to allocate designated resources appropriately. Court filings reflected detailed transaction histories and corroborating statements from educational administrators. Ethan attended the first hearing without seeking press coverage, entering through a side corridor and taking his seat quietly behind his legal counsel. There was no dramatic confrontation, only procedural clarity. Monica appeared composed, but restrained her earlier public confidence, replaced by the weight of documented evidence. When the presiding judge reviewed the timeline of transfers and school notices, the courtroom atmosphere shifted toward inevitability. A temporary financial freeze was imposed on her remaining accounts, pending restitution calculation, and a formal sentencing schedule was established. Outside the courthouse, autumn wind swept across the granite steps at 49 degrees. Reporters gathered, but received no statement from Ethan. He returned directly to Connecticut before Lily finished school. That afternoon, he met with the academy's headmaster to finalize her transition into a new educational environment equipped with enhanced accessibility programs and individualized academic support. The headmaster assured him that tuition had been secured in full through a protected trust account Ethan personally established to prevent any future diversion. When Lily arrived home that evening, she noticed new brochures on the kitchen counter, featuring bright classrooms, adaptive technology, and smiling students. Ethan explained that she would be attending a place where assistance was structured, not hurried. She listened carefully and asked whether she would still need to apologize if she walked slower than others. He answered firmly that patience would be expected from everyone around her. The next morning, the specialized driver greeted her again with the same respectful introduction, reinforcing consistency. Lily boarded confidently, gripping the railing at her own pace, while Ethan observed from the driveway, no longer tense but attentive. Inside the estate, therapy sessions progressed with measurable improvement in strength and endurance. Lily's appetite stabilized under nutritional guidance, and her pediatrician reported healthy progress during follow-up appointments. Each small report felt like a reclamation of time lost. Justice continued its course in courtrooms and documents, but the deeper restoration unfolded quietly at home in steady routines and unhurried steps that rewrote the narrative she once believed about herself. The morning Lily began at her new academy arrived crisp and bright, the temperature resting at 51 degrees as sunlight filtered through tall maple trees, lining the entrance driveway. Ethan parked near the main building instead of using the drop-off lane, choosing to walk beside her, across the paved path marked clearly with accessibility signage. The campus felt open and deliberate ramps integrated seamlessly into architecture rather than added as afterthoughts. Students moved in steady streams, some glancing curiously, but none impatient. A faculty advisor met them at the entrance, greeting Lily directly and explaining the layout at her eye level rather than over her head. That small courtesy shifted something visible in her posture. Inside, classrooms were equipped with adjustable desks and assistive technology tailored to different mobility needs. The principal outlined a structured support plan already reviewed by therapists and educators, emphasizing collaboration rather than correction. Ethan listened carefully, but allowed Lily to answer most of the questions herself. When asked how she preferred to transition between classes, she spoke softly, yet clearly requesting a few extra minutes between periods. The advisor nodded without hesitation. No one checked a watch. No one exhaled in frustration. After orientation, Ethan walked her to the classroom door and paused. Months earlier, she would have looked to him for permission to enter. Now she turned independently, offered a small but genuine smile, and said she would see him at 3:30. He remained in the hallway a moment longer than necessary, absorbing the quiet victory of that exchange. Later that week, court proceedings concluded with formal restitution orders and mandated financial penalties issued against Monica Hayes. The judgment included structured repayment terms and legal consequences consistent with documented misconduct. Ethan reviewed the official notice at his desk that evening, then closed the folder without lingering on it. The outcome mattered, but it was no longer the center of his focus. Upstairs, Lily practiced reading aloud from a new chapter book, her voice steadier with each paragraph. During dinner, she described classmates who asked about her brace with curiosity rather than ridicule, and a science lab adapted so she could participate fully. The estate that once echoed with silence now carried conversation and laughter that did not feel fragile. One evening, as they walked along the property path beneath a fading orange sky, Lily slowed intentionally and did not apologize for it. Ethan matched her pace without comment. In that unhurried rhythm, transformation completed its quiet work. Winter settled gently over Connecticut, frosting the Caldwell estate in quiet white mornings, where breath lingered in the air at 32 degrees, and the world felt slower, softer. By December, Lily's routine had transformed into something steady and predictable. She woke without hesitation, dressed without scanning for invisible approval, and ate breakfast with an appetite no longer measured by guilt. Ethan noticed the changes in small details. She asked for seconds without apology. She raised her hand during dinner conversations to share stories about her robotics club. She no longer flinched when footsteps approached from behind. At the Academy's winter showcase, parents filled the auditorium as students presented projects under bright stage lights. Lily stood beside her adaptive design prototype, explaining how adjustable hinges could improve mobility tools for children like her. Her voice carried clearly through the microphone, not loud, but confident. Ethan sat in the third row, hands clasped, listening as other parents nodded with genuine respect. When applause filled the room, Lily did not shrink from it. She accepted it. Afterward, she navigated the hallway at her own pace, while classmates waited naturally, conversations continuing without impatience. That simple courtesy felt more profound than any public courtroom ruling. Back home, the estate no longer felt like a fortress built to compensate for absence. It felt inhabited. Evenings were spent reading by the fireplace, reviewing homework at the kitchen island, or planning small weekend trips instead of crisis meetings. One night, as snow drifted softly beyond the tall windows, Lily leaned against Ethan's shoulder and asked whether life always felt this calm when people told the truth. He considered the question carefully before answering that truth does not erase difficulty, but it clears space for peace. She nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her book. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering old footprints and leaving behind something new. Spring arrived gradually, melting away the last traces of winter and revealing green across the 3-acre estate that once felt too large for two people learning how to trust each other again. By March, the temperature hovered near 60 degrees in the afternoons, and Lily insisted on practicing her walking exercises outside instead of inside the therapy room. Ethan walked beside her along the stone path that curved around the pond, matching her pace without glancing at his watch. Months earlier, every step had carried hesitation. Now her movements, though still careful, carried intention instead of fear. At school, she had been selected to assist in mentoring a younger student with a mobility brace similar to hers. The teacher explained that Lily demonstrated patience and empathy far beyond her age. When Ethan heard that, he felt pride settle quietly in his chest, not loud or boastful, but steady. One evening, she brought home a permission slip for a weekend science workshop in Boston. She handed it to him confidently, explaining the schedule and the accessibility arrangements the school had already confirmed. She did not ask whether it would cause inconvenience. She assumed support. Ethan signed the form immediately. Later that night, as they prepared dinner together, Lily accidentally dropped a glass on the kitchen floor. It shattered softly. She froze for half a second, old reflex flickering across her face. Then she looked up and said, "I will clean it up." No apology, no shrinking. Ethan handed her a towel and helped gather the pieces, both of them moving carefully but calmly. Outside, the sun dipped below the trees, casting long golden light through the windows. In that ordinary moment, surrounded by nothing dramatic at all, Ethan realized that healing does not announce itself with applause. It reveals itself in the absence of fear. By early summer, the Caldwell estate no longer felt like a symbol of wealth or defense. It felt lived in, softened by routine, and filled with the steady rhythm of a father learning presence and a daughter learning worth. On a warm June evening, with the temperature resting at 72 degrees, Ethan and Lily sat on the back patio overlooking the pond, where dragonflies skimmed across the surface of the water. Lily had just returned from her science workshop in Boston, animated and confident, as she described experiments and new friends. She spoke without glancing over her shoulder for approval. She spoke as though her voice naturally deserved space. Ethan listened carefully, recognizing that the greatest transformation had not been financial restitution or courtroom rulings. It had been the quiet rebuilding of trust. Later, as twilight settled across the property and fireflies flickered in the tall grass, Lily rested her head briefly against his arm and said she was glad she did not have to hurry anymore. The statement carried no bitterness, only relief. Ethan looked out across the 3 acres that once represented success, measured in dollars and influence. Now they represented something different: safety, stability, time. He understood that he could not rewrite the years she had learned to apologize for existing, but he could shape every year moving forward. Inside the house, framed documents confirming completed restitution and finalized custody arrangements sat untouched in a drawer no longer urgent. Outside, the evening air moved gently through the trees, unhurried. Ethan stood and offered his hand as Lily rose at her own pace. They walked back toward the house together, step for step, neither rushing the other. And for the first time since she had crossed his doorway months earlier, like a visitor in her own life, Lily walked forward, knowing she belonged exactly where she was. Did this story move your soul? Share your feelings in the comments and rate it from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you never miss a new story. Click the end screen to watch another heartfelt video. See you in the next story.